My name is Andrew, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was. I was Andrew Sinclair, youngest son of business magnate Marcus Sinclair, younger brother to Christopher, heir to a fortune that stretched back 4 generations. I lived in a mansion on the Upper East Side, attended the finest private schools, and never wanted for anything material in my entire 22 years of life. Then the DNA test results came back and everything I believed about myself shattered like crystal against stone. It started innocently enough. Christopher had been researching our family genealogy for a project, something about tracing the Sinclair lineage back to Scotland. He'd convinced our father to do one of those ancestry DNA kits just for fun. Dad had agreed, probably thinking it would be good publicity for the family name. When the results came back showing some unexpected genetic markers, Christopher suggested we all get tested too. I remember sitting in Dr. Harrison's office 3 weeks ago, expecting to discuss vacation plans or maybe get a prescription for the insomnia that had been plaguing me. Instead, he handed me a manila envelope with my name typed across the front in neat, clinical letters. "Andrew, I need you to sit down," Dr. Harrison had said, his usually warm demeanor replaced by something more careful, more professional. The DNA results were straightforward enough that even I, with no medical background, could understand them immediately. The numbers, the percentages, the cold scientific certainty that I was not Marcus Sinclair's biological son, not Christopher's biological brother, not a Sinclair at all. I'd stared at the paper until the letters blurred together, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. "There has to be a mistake," I'd whispered. "I'm afraid not. I ran the test 3 times to be absolutely certain." Dr. Harrison's voice was gentle but firm. "Andrew, you were switched at birth. It happens more rarely now, but 22 years ago, hospital protocols weren't as stringent as they are today." The drive home from the doctor's office was a blur. I kept thinking about how I'd have to tell Dad, how his face would change when he realized the son he'd raised, loved, and provided for wasn't actually his, how Christopher would look at me differently, knowing we didn't share blood after all. But when I walked into the mansion's grand foyer, Dad was already there waiting for me, his face grave. Christopher stood beside him, and I could tell from their expressions that Dr. Harrison had already called. "Andrew," Dad said, and his voice was different somehow. Not cold exactly, but measured in a way it had never been with me before. "We need to talk." The conversation that followed was surreal. Dad explained that Dr. Harrison had contacted him immediately after my appointment. As was protocol in cases like these, there were legal considerations, insurance implications, questions about identity and inheritance that would need to be addressed. "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "For me, I mean for us." Dad was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence I heard my entire future hanging in the balance. "It means," he said finally, "that we need to contact your biological family. The Harrisons ran the DNA through several databases and found a match. Your real parents are James and Elizabeth Morrison." The Morrison family. I knew the name. Everyone in our social circle did. They were old money, East Coast aristocracy, the kind of people who summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen. Wealthy, certainly, but not Sinclair wealthy, not by a long shot. "They'll want you back," Dad continued, and something in his tone made my blood run cold. "The Morrisons, they've been contacted and they're eager to meet their biological son." I felt like I was drowning. "And you? What do you want?" Another pause, longer this time. "Andrew, you understand that this changes things legally, financially. You're not my heir anymore. The trust funds, the inheritance, the company shares, none of that belongs to you." It wasn't the money that devastated me. It was the way he said it, like I was suddenly a stranger who'd been living in his house under false pretenses, like 22 years of being his son could be erased by a simple DNA test. "I see," I managed. "The Morrisons have invited you to stay with them while we sort out the legal aspects of this situation," Dad said. "I think it would be best if you accepted." I was being politely asked to leave, the only home I'd ever known, the only family I'd ever had, and I was being sent away like an unwanted house guest who'd overstayed their welcome. That night, I sat in my room, though I supposed it wasn't really my room anymore, staring at the suitcase I'd started packing. Everything felt surreal, like I was moving through someone else's life. I'd called the Morrisons earlier, had a stilted conversation with Elizabeth Morrison, who seemed nice enough but spoke to me like I was a fascinating stranger rather than her long-lost son. I was supposed to drive to their estate in Connecticut the next morning. Around midnight, there was a soft knock on my door. I expected it to be Dad, maybe coming to have a real conversation about everything that was happening. Instead, Christopher stepped into the room. Christopher was 2 years older than me, and we'd always been close despite our different personalities. He was the serious one, the one groomed from birth to take over Sinclair Industries, dark-haired and intense, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made him formidable in boardrooms and social situations alike. I'd always been the artistic one, the dreamer, content to live in his shadow while pursuing my photography and writing. "Hey," he said quietly, closing the door behind him. "Hey, I didn't look up from my packing. Come to make sure I'm really leaving?" "That's not fair, isn't it?" I finally met his eyes. "Your father made it pretty clear that I'm not welcome here anymore." "Our father," Christopher said firmly. "Whatever that DNA test says, Marcus Sinclair raised you. You're still his son." "But not his biological son, not his heir, not really family." The words tasted bitter in my mouth. Christopher moved closer, sitting on the edge of my bed. "You're my brother, Andrew. That doesn't change." "Doesn't it?" "We don't share blood, Christopher. We never did. Maybe that explains why we're so different. Maybe it explains why we complement each other so well." His voice was soft, and when I looked at him, there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. "Andrew, I need to tell you something." Something in his tone made me stop packing. "What?" "I've known for a while about the DNA thing. I mean, not the specifics, but I suspected we weren't biological brothers." I stared at him. "What do you mean, you suspected? You look nothing like Dad or me. Your mannerisms, your interests, even the way you think, it's all different. I noticed it years ago but never said anything because it didn't matter to me." Christopher ran a hand through his dark hair. "It still doesn't matter to me. It matters to your father." "My father is scared," Christopher said quietly. "He's scared of what this means for the family, for the business, for his legacy. But Andrew, I'm not." "What are you saying?" Christopher was quiet for a long moment, seeming to wrestle with something. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, measured. "I'm saying that you don't have to go to Connecticut. You could stay here." "Your father made it clear that wasn't an option." "My father doesn't make decisions for me. Not about this." Christopher moved closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Andrew, there's something else I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." The intensity in his gaze made my heart race. "Christopher, what?" "I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air between us like a confession and a bomb all at once. I felt my world shift again, but this time it wasn't the foundation cracking, it was something else entirely. "What?" "I've been in love with you for years," Christopher continued, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was saying. "I thought it was wrong, thought it was something I'd have to bury forever because you were my brother, but now we're not related," I finished quietly. "Now we're not related," he confirmed, "and I can't let you walk out of my life without telling you how I feel." I sat down heavily on the bed beside him, my mind reeling. "Christopher, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now, but Andrew, please don't go to Connecticut. Stay here, with me. Let me show you that family isn't just about blood." I looked at him, really looked at him, and suddenly saw things I'd been blind to for years. The way he'd always been protective of me, more than just a typical older brother. The way his eyes followed me when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he'd never seemed interested in any of the women our parents tried to set him up with. "How long?" I asked quietly. "Since you were 17, maybe 18. You'd started college, started growing into yourself, and I realized that what I felt for you wasn't brotherly love anymore. It was something else entirely. And you never said anything." "How could I?" "You were my brother, Andrew. I thought I was sick for feeling that way about you." Christopher's voice cracked slightly. "I've spent years hating myself for it." Without thinking, I reached for his hand. His fingers were warm, slightly calloused from the rock climbing he did in his spare time. "You're not sick, Christopher. You're not." "I know that now, the DNA test. It doesn't change how I feel about you, but it changes what's possible for us. I squeezed his hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. I need you to know something too. What? I've always felt different around you, like there was something just under the surface that I couldn't name or understand. I thought it was just admiration, or maybe jealousy because you were everything I thought I could never be. I took a shaky breath, but maybe it was something else. Christopher's eyes searched my face. Andrew, I used to watch you sometimes when you were reading or working, when you thought no one was looking, and I'd feel this longing, this want that I couldn't explain because I thought it was wrong to want your own brother that way. And now? I looked down at our joined hands, then back up at his face. Now I'm wondering if maybe it wasn't wrong, just complicated. Christopher shifted closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe you're not the only one who's been in love with someone you thought you couldn't have. The confession hung between us, raw and honest and terrifying. Christopher's free hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. Andrew, he whispered, and then he was kissing me. It was gentle at first, tentative, like he was afraid I might pull away. Instead, I kissed him back, my hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted like the coffee he'd been drinking, and something uniquely him. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Stay, he whispered against my lips. Please stay. Where? Your father made it clear. In my room, in my bed, in my life. Christopher's eyes were intense, desperate. I have my own apartment in the city, my own money, my own life separate from Dad's business. We could make this work, Andrew. We could try. Christopher, this is crazy. We've been brothers for 22 years. People will talk, will assume things. Let them talk. Let them assume whatever they want. His hand was still on my face, thumb tracing patterns on my skin. I've spent years pretending not to love you. I won't spend another day doing it. I closed my eyes, leaning into his touch. The smart thing would be to go to Connecticut, to meet my biological family, to start over somewhere new where no one knew about the complicated mess of my past. But the smart thing had never appealed to me much. Okay, I whispered. Okay, I'll stay with you. The smile that spread across Christopher's face was radiant, transforming his usually serious expression into something bright and hopeful. Really? Really, but Christopher, we need to take this slow. This is all new territory for both of us. As slow as you need, he promised, leaning his forehead against mine. We have time. That night I slept in Christopher's room for the first time. Not in his bed, that felt like too much too soon, but on the small couch by his window, wrapped in a blanket he'd given me. But I wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. The next morning, Christopher had the conversation with his father that I couldn't face myself. I heard their voices through the walls, Christopher's calm and determined, Dad's rising in anger and disbelief. When it was over, Christopher found me in the kitchen nursing a cup of coffee with shaking hands. He's not happy, Christopher said, pouring himself coffee. I imagine not. But he'll adjust, he doesn't have a choice. Christopher sat beside me at the kitchen island. I told him that you're staying, that I'm taking responsibility for you, and that if he has a problem with it, he can take it up with me. You don't have to fight your father for me. Yes, I do. Christopher's voice was firm. Andrew, you're not just some random person who wandered into our lives, your family, maybe not by blood, but by choice, by love. That means something. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a new normal. Christopher had been right about having his own life. He maintained an apartment in Manhattan that I'd never seen before, a space that was entirely his. It was smaller than the mansion, but more comfortable somehow, filled with books and artwork and evidence of a life lived outside of his father's expectations. We talked constantly during those early days, unpacking 22 years of complicated history and trying to figure out how to move forward. Christopher told me about the years he'd spent fighting his feelings for me, about the guilt and confusion that had shaped so much of his adult life. I shared my own confusion, the sense I'd always had of being different, of not quite fitting into the Sinclair mold. I used to think there was something wrong with me. I admitted one evening as we sat on his couch, my feet in his lap while he absently massaged them. Like I was broken somehow, because I could never be the son your father wanted. There's nothing wrong with you, Christopher said firmly. You're creative and thoughtful and kind. You see beauty in things other people miss. That's not broken, Andrew. That's rare. Your father doesn't see it that way. My father sees the world in terms of profit margins and market shares. He doesn't understand people like you, people who create instead of consume. Christopher's hands stilled on my feet. I'm learning not to let his limitations define my worth. Maybe you should try the same thing. It was good advice, though hard to follow. 22 years of trying to live up to Marcus Sinclair's expectations didn't disappear overnight, but slowly with Christopher's help I began to see myself differently. The physical aspect of our relationship developed gradually. We'd been living together for almost a month before we shared our first real kiss, standing in his kitchen after dinner, talking about something inconsequential when the conversation just stopped. Christopher had been in the middle of saying something about his work when he paused, looking at me with an expression I was beginning to recognize. What? I asked. Nothing. Just, you're beautiful. The compliment hit me unexpectedly, making heat rise in my cheeks. Christopher, I know we're taking this slow, and I respect that, but I need you to know how I see you, Andrew. I need you to know that when I look at you, I see someone extraordinary. This time, when he kissed me, there was nothing tentative about it. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, and I could feel months of suppressed longing in the way his lips moved against mine. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. I love you, he whispered against my lips. I love you too, I replied, and meant it more than I'd ever meant anything in my life. That night, we made love for the first time. It was careful and sweet, both of us nervous and eager and amazed by how right it felt. Christopher was gentle with me, patient, taking his time to learn my body the way he approached everything else, with careful attention and genuine care. Afterward, as we lay tangled in his sheets, I traced patterns on his chest and tried to process everything that had changed in my life. Do you regret it? Christopher asked quietly. Any of it? I considered the question seriously. A month ago, I'd been Andrew Sinclair, trust fund kid with a predetermined future. Now I was Andrew Morrison, a name I was still getting used to, in love with the man I thought was my brother, living a life I never could have imagined. No, I said finally, I don't regret any of it. Even the DNA test? Even finding out the truth? Especially that. I lifted my head to look at him. Christopher, if we'd never found out we weren't related, this never could have happened. We would have spent our whole lives loving each other and thinking it was wrong. When you put it that way, maybe I should send my father a thank you card for suggesting those ancestry tests. I laughed, the sound light and free in a way I hadn't felt in years. Maybe we both should. 6 months later, we were living openly together, no longer hiding our relationship from family or friends. Marcus had eventually come around, though it had taken time and several difficult conversations. The Morrison family had been understanding about my choice to stay with the Sinclairs, though they'd invited me to visit whenever I wanted. I still thought of myself as Andrew Sinclair. Though legally my name had been changed back to Morrison, blood might not make a family, but choice certainly did. And I'd chosen Christopher, chosen the life we were building together, chosen love over fear. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd never found out? Christopher asked one evening as we sat on the balcony of our apartment, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold. Sometimes, I admitted, but then I remember that we did find out, and we're here, and we're happy. That seems like enough. More than enough, Christopher agreed, pulling me closer. It seems like everything. And as I settled into his arms, watching the lights of the city flicker to life below us, I had to agree. Sometimes the most unexpected discoveries lead to the most extraordinary love stories. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into, and sometimes the person you've been searching for your whole life has been right beside you all along.